Let's speak to Andreas Krieg, who is a Middle East expert at King's College London. Andreas, very good to see you. How concerned will they be, the IDF, that if this pause is lengthened, yes, the hostages will be released, but this does give the possibility for Hamas to regroup and rearm?
Hi, good afternoon. I think the concerns by the IDF and by Israel more widely that Hamas would be able to regroup and use this as a military advantage, I think are exaggerated. The fact is most Hamas fighters are kind of surrounded in Gaza City. They have nowhere to go. And even if they're able to relocate themselves, they can't resupply. They can't really restaff. They're not going to be rearmed in any way.
But
So,
Andreas, is
yeah,
it possible, if they're in tunnels underneath Gaza City and throughout the Gaza Strip, is it possible to know exactly what is going on down there, even how much weaponry they have?
No, not at all. And that's the point. I mean, the IDF has made quite a lot of progress on overground, but not really any progress underground. Hence why I don't think the IDF will stop the fighting. But regardless of the ceasefire, whatever happened underground was always somewhat not concerned with what was happening overground. So whether you have a ceasefire or not, and that's the whole point of this, there isn't a strategy that Israel has militarily to actually achieve the objective of eradicating Hamas and the fighting forces, because it's going to be so complex. There is not a military solution to this. You need to have a diplomatic one. First, diplomatically get the hostages out, but then also trying to potentially negotiate over an expulsion of Hamas leadership and some of the fighters somewhere else outside of the Gaza Strip, because you can't fight until the last Hamas fighter has been killed. And I think that's an illusion. And that is also something that works against the IDF, because there's a growing concern in the Western world, in the US, in Europe, that there isn't a strategy, that Israel is kind of operating in that vacuum of strategy here, where the killing happens without a clearly defined end game. And that's why everyone is so nervous and becoming very impatient with this war. And that's why I also think this ceasefire works against the IDF, because time is ticking and it kind of undermines the tempo and the momentum of the operation.
Can I get your view when you talk about the ending of Hamas militarily, that being the ambition of the IDF and what we hear? You don't think that's realistic, but I also wonder what your thoughts are on Hamas in terms of its ideology, because you can kill Hamas fighters, but presumably that's much harder for the IDF to conquer.
That's absolutely right. So this is the whole problem. If you don't have a political strategy, and what is required is a political strategy out of this conflict, which goes obviously far further back than the 7th of October, is trying to undermine the idea of Hamas, the idea of resistance. This is something you can't kill with military force. This is very simple counterinsurgency strategies that you kind of develop a political alternative to Hamas and offer it to the Gazans, to the Palestinians, together with the West Bank. I mean, this has to be an integrated effort. And I think that's what everyone should be working towards.
But
and I think
Andreas, we have now seen Israel and Hamas negotiate, obviously with the Qataris and the Egyptians, over this particular hostage deal. Does that give you any faith that they could perhaps negotiate in the future? Because what you hear from many people in the Arab world is that Hamas is never going to be totally out of the equation. It can't just be about the Palestinian Authority. They're going to have some involvement. And yet the Israelis are saying they will never negotiate or talk to Hamas in this way. How do you see that conundrum?
Well, I mean, officially speaking, Hamas is part of the Palestinian Authority. They're not part of the PLO. So this is why Arab states are saying Hamas has a role to play in this, because you can't fully eradicate them. And also, they're not just in Gaza. They do have support in the West Bank as well. So what is required is really a much broader structured approach to the socio-political problem of governance in Palestine. For that to happen, Israel has to make certain concessions to actually make it feasible for the Palestinian Authority, however it's going to look like after this, to govern that territory and actually have their own sovereign state. And that's where I think most of the efforts are going. I think what we see now with this kind of diplomatic effort is that we're a first step into a space where everyone is talking to one another. What needs to happen is the radicals, which are undermining and spoiling the conflict, to be eradicated on both sides. That includes Hamas, but it also includes the radicals in the Netanyahu government. And then kind of sit around. And I think what we're seeing already, the Qataris are pushing towards this quite a lot. Obviously, they've been very instrumental in this hostage deal, but the Qataris are pushing for something much broader broader, including the Arab world and also including the United States. And there is some talk that potentially even already as soon as December, the United States will host a summit in the United States to talk about a broader peace deal and a two-state solution, because there is consensus on that. With the exception of Israelis hardliners, there is a consensus that what is required is a two-state solution, because that's the root cause of the conflict. If you don't address this, you will never have peace in Gaza. It's as simple as that.
Andreas, really good to get your thoughts, to look to the future and get some analysis on that too. Thank you so much.